Hi everyone. Right, so now we need to talk about the Hierophant. Now this card has been known by so many names. You will see a picture of him up here. That's from my personal tarot deck that is coming out in November. So if you'd like, and these aren't the final copies, it's just a picture for on here. But if you would like one of these decks, you can contact me, leave me a comment, or send me a message if you've got my number or an email, and we can definitely reserve one for you on pre-order as well. Now, right, so talking about this card, we need to talk about its keywords first, which is tradition, counsel, religious doctrine, and spiritual guidance. Now, I'm going to be honest, this is one of my least favorite cards in the deck. I think everybody has that one card that they really dislike, and it's usually the card that they themselves personally struggle with. But let's first go through some depictions of the High Priest. Now, when we look at the Witch's Tarot, we've got an exceptionally traditional one. He's dressed in the white and the red, and we can see why the original name for the Hierophant was actually the Pope, and in many cards it's now referred to as the High Priest because this is a male counterpart of the High Priestess. We see these keys very much like the pillars that we see in the High Priestess, Severity and Mercy. We've got night and we've got day. He is holding a staff in his hand. And yes, let me just zoom in a little bit. I wonder if you can see it on there, but this one's wearing actually a pentacle around the neck. Right, so next up, my favorite depiction of it is this one. And I just love this depiction. He's still got the little keys dangling there. He's got this book. He's got the pillars. You can see the stars, the nighttime, but it also looks like it's daylight because there's these doves flying there. And then right there, we can actually see another symbol, which is the horned god symbol in most cases, and in others this would represent Taurus because this is the card for Taurus. Right, so next up, once again, we see him here in the Morgan Greer, looking very much Pope-like. For those who've watched King Charles's coronation, you would have seen these gloves that he had put on to hold the scepter. We've got the keys, we've got lots of reds. And here we've got the Druid craft, which is, of course, a much more rural depiction of it. We do have the bull's horns there for Taurus. Also the way that he's holding his hands, showing the horned god, because he is the high priest. We're seeing a lot of red. And yes, he's sitting on a throne. There's a chalice and a sword. We don't see any specific keys on him as per se, but we're going to get back to that in a little bit. Bringing us to the last card, which is an exceptionally modern depiction of the Hierophant, and this is from the Lightseer's Tarot. So we see the staircase to heaven, so to speak, and he's sitting there. We still see his scepter right there. I don't think we can see Taurus on this card, not really, unfortunately, but we do see in there, we see a lot of symbols. I know it's very difficult to catch this on camera, but we see a Triskelion and a Triquetra, we see a pentacle, we see the sign, we are seeing the Christian fish, so we're seeing just a lot of religious symbols in there as well. Right, so let's get going. So when we are looking at the original depiction of the Hierophant, we're looking at a mature man, usually quite old in most cases, usually got a beard, and he is a very commanding presence. He's usually seated between two pillars. Sorry about that, but he's seated between two pillars. He wears rich robes of office, which are usually purple, reds, golden robes in certain cards I've seen. I like the Druid craft one where he's basically dressed as one of their tribal leaders. So we're seeing all of that going on. And then he, in his left hand, he holds the symbol of religious order, which is that scepter that you saw. That is the symbol of religious order and the hierarchy, uh, divinity, and so forth. And that is usually the symbol of the religion that he belongs to. Now, that is why we're seeing in certain of the cards where he's not wearing it, he might have a pentacle around his neck, or he might have some other something showing his religion. Now, in the original cards, you will usually see two altar boys that's bowing kind of at his feet or sitting at his feet, and he's busy giving them the blessing. So yes, but in the modern depictions, they have removed that basically completely from most cards. You don't often see the altar boys anymore. Now, let's jump in. Now, when we look at ancient Greeks, the Hierophants were priests who guided the followers through sacred rituals and sacred rites. So, in actual fact, he was nothing more but a high priest. Today, the role of the Hierophant lives on in everyday spiritual teachers, anybody who leads or follows through long-standing religions or rituals or traditions. So what we're looking at here is any pastor, minister, high priest, shaman. Gosh, the list goes on and on and on throughout the many traditions and denominations that we find in so many different religious practices, philosophies of life, and paths that we do have on earth today. So we're looking at actually any spiritual teacher, anybody who holds keys to tradition and keys to ancient rituals or old rituals. It can even just be the head of the family trying to kind of keep everybody on the traditional way. Now, the card usually symbolizes teaching, tradition, inspiration, and revelation. Right, so when we start looking at that, that's why he's the holder of the keys, because he's the holder of the keys in terms of tradition, in terms of teaching, but in many of them you will also see a book that he's reading from. It's usually an old book, an old tomb, and he reveals what's in there and he explains what's in there, and he tries to hold up the traditions that's in there. So we're looking at an extremely traditional figure here. We're looking at you know what, the answer is not in change. The answer is not in something new. The answer is actually in the ancient text, in the way that it has always been done. See how we're leading here from the emperor right through to the high priest, the Hierophant. The one is not changeable at all, and here we come to somebody who is the one who holds all of that knowledge for you. Now, once we look at the word Hierophant, it shares the same origin as the word hierarchy. And that's an organization with varying levels of authority on matters of faith, usually. Now, he has the power to speak on behalf of the gods, to explain the teachings of divine wisdom, and to serve as a bridge between this world and the next. Now, I've spent a lot of time with this card because I've always had a bit of a struggling with this card, reading it in a reading. I always say everybody has that one card that they will struggle with for the rest of their lives. And to me, it's the high priest, and what I've renamed him personally within myself is the philosopher, because that's who he is. He's like one of the ancient Greek philosophers that goes like, let's look at every ancient text there is. Let's really take a more of a spiritual approach to this, and then come up with new ideas from that. So it will always have this stability, this foundation that it's based in, but it can grow. It can grow because he's exceptionally wise. He's very spiritually aligned, and even though traditions are very important to him, he doesn't have a problem getting rid of a certain tradition should there be ample evidence to not have this tradition within his belief system anymore. So on that, I can really connect to the Hierophant as well. So he does serve as a bridge between this world and the next, because he is the voice of the ancients. He's the voice of the people who came before. He's the voice of old families, of the father and the grandfather and the great grandfather, going all the way back. And when we start looking at the high priestess, for instance, who's a very intuitive person who looks at sixth sense and psychic abilities, towards the empress, who has a little bit more of an emotional edge but still logical, and we get to the emperor, and he's exceptionally logical. You know, things need to be done a certain way. We get to the Hierophant, and he is spiritual. He's spiritual guidance. He says, look within your beliefs, look back at what's right and wrong. He starts teaching morals and values. He will present you with a question like, if a mother were to steal to feed her children, does that make her a bad person for stealing, or a good mother for feeding her children? And in most scenarios, you would go, well, that makes her a great mother. But, or let's say you're very big on morals and values, and you go like, well, that makes her a bad person, regardless of the intention of what she did. She still did something wrong. And the Hierophant's the one that walks in and he says, okay, stop. Rather ask the correct question. So this is the card that says ask the correct question. Stop answering. Stop trying to answer things. Search for the correct question. And that's what makes him a philosopher at the end of the day, because he will go to that question and he'll go like, well, first of all, is this mother on the streets? Does she have the means to get a job? Has a job been offered to her? Has she tried to get a job? You know, he would start asking questions, and by asking the questions, he will reveal a much bigger situation than what you initially thought there was. He will look into that mother's background, into her childhood, the way that she's been raised. Has she maybe been raised with the concept that stealing is okay as long as it's from a big corporation and not from your neighbor? You know, things like that he would definitely look at. And instead of just giving a straight answer, he would say, well, let's look at a bigger presented situation, and we look at the spirituality behind that as well. And he's actually looking at a lot of subconscious things and the way that neural pathways have been built. So he goes more into the psychology of it all at the end of the day. Now, when we start looking at the two altar boys in the original, or the two pillars, you'll see that the pillars are usually representative of night and day, but both would usually be white or yellow or cream. It is because they are not the normal pillars of severity and mercy, even though they can be. They do symbolize light and dark and good and evil, but the reason why they're both usually the same color is, whereas the high priestess can look at it and say, well, the one has to be the negative one and the one needs to be the positive one, and it might not look like that from the outside, so we need to intuitively look at this. He goes like, well, the two both have a means to the end. They're both important. We do need the negative as well as the positive. We do need the light as well as the dark. You know, light would not exist if darkness is not there. So he sees them as exceptionally neutral. He doesn't see them as a positive and negative. He just sees them as two neutral states that work together as one. And once again, he's asking a bigger question here. And he is the gatekeeper standing between those pillars that says, you need to understand these pillars to go through the gate at the end of the day. So he does keep the realms in check quite a bit. Now we need to talk about the altar boys, which in many newer decks has been replaced with two birds. It's usually two white doves. I see on the Druidcraft Tarot, we've got a little robin. The rest are still with the others, or we've got the steps and such. Now that all has to do with spirit and with inspiration. because you need inspiration and you need spirit in order to ask the correct questions. Because once again, he understands won't lead you to an answer, but it will lead you to the next question and the next, bringing greater understanding, because answers do not bring understanding. But asking the correct questions does actually bring understanding, because it's thought-provoking, and that is who he is. And he goes back into that tradition. He's a very all over the place card sometimes, but when we start to understand the Hierophant and we understand where he's coming from, we go like, I've got you. I'll be back soon with the next card.